So Canada has some major advantages and politically some disadvantages.
Hi everyone, Flo here, founder and CEO of Digital Networking for Thought Leaders. I'm really excited to present our inaugural In Conversation with video. This is a new series that will explore important topics, trends, and visions that impact us all in Canada and around the globe. Our first guest is Jeff Booth. Jeff is a Canadian serial entrepreneur, a tech disruption expert, involved in at least a dozen ventures, and he's also a household name in the Bitcoin world since writing the acclaimed The Price of Tomorrow. This is a fascinating interview, and Jeff will explain the impact of Bitcoin on Canada and Canadian businesses and tell us why he believes Bitcoin adoption would drive a massive cycle of innovation in Canada. Enjoy, and if you like the interview, please give us a like, share the video, and subscribe to stay informed of upcoming videos. Jeff, I actually have a question to ask you that isn't necessarily about Bitcoin, but is more in preparation for this call. You said to me that you actually kind of do this all the time. You speak to Canadian and international leaders from business, from government. Maybe you could explain why you think that is.
I think the book I wrote and why I wrote it hit a nerve, or not hit a nerve. It kind of dealt with the paradox we live in, and in technology being deflationary, and our monetary system being inflationary, and a lot of people are trying to solve that paradox, and so when you again, for those who've read the book, it predicted all the events that are unfolding today, and it will predict the next ones as well. As what's happening is one system has to fail, unfortunately, and we transitioned into another system, and so I guess whether it came out at the right time, whether it was the big issue that nobody was talking about, pretending that everything was still okay and we could keep on going. I don't know what made that happen, but it seemed to have hit a nerve, and then it's just brought me into this space in a pretty profound way all over the world.
Yeah. Well, you already made a few bold statements there, so we're going to get into all of those. It's clear, obviously, that there is more uncertainty in the world right now than probably most of us can remember in terms of climate change, in terms of disruptive technologies, the pandemic, of course. Now we have a war in Europe, and in general, we have just so much polarization in the world. What do you think got us to this point?
Yeah, and that's what I talked about in the book. You have technology that is a deflationary force, which is moving faster and faster and faster. It's exponential in function. And that technology is our ideas, our thoughts being used if we use them, right? So if they meet the market, we use this technology that is now touching 50 people online, and when you put it in digital format, and it's free to do so, can touch millions of people. We didn't have the access to that type of technology 20 years ago. We had to fly somewhere to touch those people, and the message couldn't spread as fast. This is one component, but it's pretty obvious that technology is core to. We use it, and we wouldn't use it unless it made our lives better. And the function of that technology, whether it's Zoom, your calculator app on your phone, or any other piece of technology, it gives us more for less. That's why we use it. That's what broke Kodak. We take more photos today. You get abundance, and the cost falls. And that force, if you realize that underlying everything is that force, and technology is moving into every industry faster and faster and faster, it's pretty obvious that you would think, why aren't prices falling at that rate? And so that's the question I had for probably 10 years before I wrote my book, because I could see it in every other company I was dealing with. I could see it in my own company. And when I realized what was happening, that we lived in a monetary system that had to work the other way against our technology progress, I just extrapolated what that would mean for my kids going forward. And that's what made me write the book. And so those two systems cannot work together. They're two completely different systems, but we measure our world from the system that we live in, that's fighting against a natural force of technology moving faster and faster and faster. And so when we measure our world from that system, an inflationary system that we don't even question, why do we have an inflationary system, and why must we? We don't even ask that question. We take it for granted because we've lived in that world for so long, that we start to miss the bigger picture of what's happening around the world. And that bigger picture, every one of these essentially islands of misinformation, or is actually all a derivative of breaking money.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you about first principles, because I know you're a big believer, but I had a little smirk on my face because you mentioned the calculator app, and I was just thinking that's probably the simplest app that we have on our phone, correct me if I'm wrong, compared to all the other very, sophisticated apps we have.
Well, so just quickly on why I said calculator app, or any of the apps on your phone. There's a misconception that people think that they're free because of advertising, and that's not true. They're free because there's no entrepreneurs that will go and write a new calculator app because there's no money in it. Because when technology reduces something to a line of code, the marginal cost of production drops to zero, and with AI driving faster and faster and faster, that's going to happen throughout everything. And there's no more money in it, and so something becomes free. That's it. And there's a perception that we miss because we've lived in this environment so long, that people think economics is really hard to understand. It's all about value, and it's not about value. It's about scarcity. And I can prove it, because if it was about value, the oxygen everybody's breathing right now would be the most expensive thing. Why is it free? And it's free because it's abundant. And you can only make money on oxygen underwater, in a hospital, in space, where it's scarce. If you understand that technology is bringing that abundance everywhere, the question is, why are we stopping it through a monetary policy that needs to work the other way?
Yeah, that's such a powerful question. And I'm sure a few people, when you talked about oxygen, probably started thinking, I wonder if one day someone will figure out a way to monetize that, as maybe some have already monetized water. But I digress. So first principles. First of all, what's a first principle, and what are maybe the 2 or 3 ones, briefly, that have become, let's say, your strongest beliefs?
So a first principle is, if you a good way to find a first principle, ask why 5 times, and keep asking that why to a building block that is true. So if you looked at a first principle, why is inflation required to run a productive economy? I don't think most people ask that question. And if you ask that question enough times, you realize, it's not. There may have been a time where it was on hard money that couldn't gain velocity through technology, and you had to have credit based on top of hard money. But if you realize that question today, it's not. And so when you're asking questions to get to first principles, you're trying to find out what is essentially removing your bias from what the world looks like, and the reasons that you tell yourself the world looks like that, to get somewhere deeper. And from somewhere deeper, you can find real opportunity. This is what a lot of businesses do. That's what I do as an entrepreneur. You look at a state of the world before technology, and you say, everybody's doing it this way. This is the way the monopoly gained their power. And now with technology moving faster and faster, and where is it going? How can you build a company that delivers value to other people in a different way? And to do that, a lot of time, you have to come to first principles. But that's a brief talk about how to get there.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously we framed this event as a conversation that is kind of macro around inflation, deflation, around, the polarization we talked about in the world. But probably the key word that got people's attention, curious, skeptical, maybe full of questions, is Bitcoin and its crypto. So we're going to get right into that. But of course, within that, we will talk about, the very reasons. So let me ask you, Jeff, and especially because you are Canadian, and so I'd like to believe you have Canadians, best interests at heart. How important is it for Canadian business leaders to understand Bitcoin? And just two quick quotes. One is from the CEO of Marathon, which is one of the biggest mining companies, crypto mining in the world. He said every industry is getting into this. And then from Michael Saylor, who's probably seen as the guru of Bitcoin today, and the CEO of MicroStrategy, first company ever to put Bitcoin on its balance sheet and has more Bitcoin than anyone else on earth today. He said every institution is looking at Bitcoin. So why should they?
And again, this is a transition, and people will get it eventually. It may take them time, but eventually the light will turn on.
Like the internet in the 90s, you're saying?
But that's exactly it. If you think back to the internet, before the internet, and what early companies said about the internet, it's virtually the same thing that they're saying about the Bitcoin. And most of the monopolies that didn't get on board the internet are no longer the monopolies today. They've been replaced with internet companies that are the new monopolies, giving us value in a different way. And so Bitcoin, what is important is Bitcoin isn't a company, it's a protocol layer like the internet. So if you're investing in Bitcoin, it's like you being able to invest in the internet itself. I just started a venture fund to invest in layer 2, layer 3 solutions on top of that. Those will be the types of companies on top of that. But when you ask why should somebody or why shouldn't they, they should for sure learn and then make their own decision on what that looks like. But for me, in looking at all of I don't want to be Sears. I don't want to be trying to block something that's inevitable that gives more value. I don't want to be Kodak. I don't want to be and so at first principles, I'm always looking where the world's going and trying to build to that. Besides that, which might be where I can build value, which might be important for you. The more important thing in fixing the incentive structure to the world, this is it is an incentive structure that truly fixes the world and allows technology, the abundance gained from technology, to be broadly transferred. There is actually no other way, short of concentrating all wealth and power in very few hands and letting them decide for everybody else. And I'd love to, like in the questions or whatever, we could dive deeper into what I just said, because it's a really important point. CBDCs, all of the structures that we believe in, that why do we trust? I'll give you an example in democracy. We believe we have a democracy, and we vote for kind of who's in power. But if all political parties derive most of their revenue from inflation, which is the most repressive tax because it takes from the middle class and poor and transfers to the rich, and 60% of the revenue is gained from inflation, and we don't have a vote in inflation, and it's the most important thing. Do we actually live in a democracy? And these are hard questions to ask because they challenge our core beliefs, and we think we do. And but capitalism and communism look exactly the same, in a structure where we actually don't have a vote in that hidden theft in our money.
Just to be clear, what you're saying is we vote for our governments, we vote for policies. In a sense, we vote for taxes, but we do not vote for inflation. Is that what you're saying?
We don't. Yeah, exactly. And it's the primary driver of government spending and everything else, and how much is transferred from middle class and poor to the wealthy.
So let me ask you this question then about inflation and deflation. There are great thinkers all around the world, and they do have divergent views. There are people probably in your camp that believe that we are in for deflation in the coming period, notwithstanding, of course, government interference. I guess that's the elephant in the room. And then you have people like Cathy Wood, for example, also a very respected investor, etc., who believes in inflation. And it's a hot topic right now. So which is it? I mean, are we in for inflation?
I love that you asked that question, because here's the truth of that question is this. We live in a macro deflationary market because of technology, and probably always have. And what's driving the inflation is somebody's choice of how much money to print, which they will always choose to do because.
But what about supply chain? People always talk about that. Is that not a driver?
Not a driver. All of these things are derivative of the monetary easing. Supply chain, the war is a derivative of that. The supply chains are a derivative of that. All of it.
Wow.
Essentially, you're breaking a natural force, and I think I said this on stage at the Blockchain Consortium too. But technologies are always been deflationary. If you go back to Roman times, why a long debt cycle takes 500 years to blow up and people go to war and it rips down society is because we used to have hard money in gold or gold coins that then they clipped the coins at the end of that long debt cycle and they drove inflation because hard money couldn't move around society fast enough to be able to provide kind of growth to society. So then you'd build credit on top of it. Who would we vote for? A politician that said, don't worry, we can pay everything, we can spend more, and we're going to give you more money. Or a politician that said, we're going to do the hard thing. We'll always vote for the majority of people will vote for politicians who tell us they can give us short-term gain and there is no cost to it.
Kind of our human nature, you're saying, essentially. Our time
nature.
Preference, as Thévenin would say, is always short. In other words, we're always more interested in the next days, months, years, as we can project ourselves 10 or 20 years from now.
So this is a human problem, and then not any specific government problem. And then you'd build credit on top of hard money, so you could handle velocity of money. Once that credit was on top of hard money, then there was an incentive in the system to make the hard money less because the credit could gain more leverage, gain more money. So banking industry could gain more leverage. And at some point, you couldn't pay back the debt. And governments always chose and choose today to monetize that debt.
Right and left, right? Every political...
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. The whole political left and right is just not, it's kind of nonsense until you go to first principles on this. Because both will print and they'll tell a story about who they're printing for, kind of to engage their base, but both will print. Because they have to. Because if you ask the other question, and if you go through society, by the way, through history, those resets are happening at a faster and faster cadence throughout history. First 500 years, then 120 years, then 100 years. And Bretton Woods failed in 1971. That was 50 years from Bretton Woods. And now the petrodollar system is failing today, and another 50 years, because technology is moving faster one way and the credit system needs to offset that faster the other way. So that's what's driving the big debt cycles. And that's what Bitcoin solves, the paradox of not needing massive debt to be able to run economies. So we can get into that a little deeper, but because essentially you have peer-to-peer money that you can move unlimited speed without building credit for velocity.
We're going to move ahead a bit because I want to leave a lot of time for Q&A, and there's just clearly so much ground to cover here, but maybe just a quick follow-on. So is there a specific impact that Bitcoin and, let's say, the crypto revolution, as many call it, will have on Canada and on Canadian business? I mean, are we likely to be disproportionately impacted here in Canada than any other country, and if so, why?
So Canada has some major advantages, and politically some disadvantages. So the major advantages is we're raw materials country, and we have tons of abundant energy all over the place, and that abundant energy could be utilized for Bitcoin mining and clean, green Bitcoin mining, and it could make Canada a powerhouse. More than that, if we got our act together as far as ensuring the best entrepreneurs came here, that we were Bitcoin friendly, then you would drive a massive cycle of innovation in Canada. But that innovation's coming anyways. It's almost like if you're in North Korea and you shut off the internet for your society, the internet still moves. It's an open protocol. And it's just your society doesn't gain the benefit of the internet, and that's what's happening today with the decentralized open protocol around the world. And so I just spent some time in El Salvador. I spent time in a bunch of different countries that are moving quickly here, and you should see the innovation in the space
and the money, frankly, right?
They're racing to the best free jurisdictions that are driving innovation, just like what happened in the internet. So we can choose to block it in Canada, or we can choose to innovate on top of it.
So I have a sense that you might be going to the Central African Republic in not too long, because it was announced this morning, and it was predicted that they are the second country in the world to make Bitcoin legal tender. And a lot of people are saying, this is very much just the beginning. We're going to see a lot more.
Yeah, and at the Bitcoin conference, or prior to the Bitcoin conference. So this is again. President of Madeira is doing the same thing. 5% tax rate, making Bitcoin legal tender. And I've been talking to the president of Madeira for months leading up to this announcement. It literally becomes unstoppable because of game theory and the incentive it puts into politicians' hands or populations' hands to be able to move faster, to be able to be able to help their citizens in the long run, on the free market.
What if someone in the audience today is thinking El Salvador, Central African Republic, Madeira? Do you have any better country for me?
Yeah, okay. Way higher level. Again, back to first principles. Think about what ends up happening in a business. Think about what happened in Walmart, Sears, everything else. In internet gave an ability for let's use Amazon as an example, competing against those. Were the first people on the shelves at Amazon, on the shelves at Walmart, or they were the ones blocked? And they were the ones blocked. What happens is the internet, what happens with any technology is it lowers the cost of adoption, and the people that it gives a 10x type of improvement.
And the threshold, right, the barrier to entry.
And the threshold. And the people most hurt by the existing monopoly move first because they have a massive advantage. And that is across the board in technology. Technology is always from the bottom up. And typically the monopolies don't see it; they try to block it because it threatens their monopoly. The only change that's happening today is what I just said is happening in money itself, and a control structure for money that we took for granted, and that affects every other decision, everything built on top, and it's happening from the bottom up. First in people, then in small companies, then in countries, and it's accelerating. So it's a peer-to-peer network that's accelerating, and it's so early. But if you track the rate of growth, the rate of growth is exactly the same rate of growth as the internet rate of growth, but we're in 1998 in the internet. And if you think about what happened after 1998 in the internet, most of the value gain came later on as more people understood it. That's what's happening in Bitcoin today.
Yeah, and of course today we can't imagine we wouldn't be here today without the internet. I want to diffuse another topic. I use the word diffuse because I think it's kind of a loaded question or a hot topic that many people are concerned about. You mentioned Canada's abundant energy resources and how we could be, kind of maybe you want to call it an ESG friendly, Bitcoin mining jurisdiction. but a lot of people are very concerned about Bitcoin's energy consumption and frankly, crypto in general. What do you tell these people about those concerns they have? And maybe you could speak a little bit to sort of the economic growth versus sustainable growth debate.
Yeah, and at the very top of the first principles, you have to ask yourself this. Should oil prices be what they are today if we've invented all this new technology to make it easier to extract? And the simple answer is no, right? Prices should have fallen a long time ago. So why are prices so high? Because we put, and what is the knock-on effect of those prices high? The prices are high because we print money to make prices high, because those prices have to rise higher and higher all the time. And then people need two jobs to be able to pay for the price rising. So they're working hard. They have to buy more things in an endless loop to keep prices going up forever, only because we decide to print money. So the natural market, so ESG cannot be solved. It's impossible. Physics says it's impossible to solve from a monetary system that must grow forever by manipulating money. ESG is the existing system. It blows up our planet because we live on a finite planet that you can't grow forever on. The only system that allows us, and I want to double click on something, and worse, without a system that removed that ability for human beings to print money. History says if somebody could control others by printing money and changing the rules, or give themselves an advantage and somebody else a disadvantage, they always will. Not might, they will. So our human nature won't allow us, without something that removes that from our ability, like Bitcoin, to move on to a different system that allows the planet to heal. Again, ESG is the system. There is no possible way to fix ESG from a system that needs to manipulate money forever. Now, a level down. So Bitcoin is the only thing I've seen that allows that to solve that paradox. Another level down is energy is a part of everything. And if we're going to be a Kardashian of one planet, kind of utilizing energy, Bitcoin gives us an incentive to bring on more energy and green energy at a lower cost. It's an economic incentive to build out a grid around clean energy. And I think it's the only thing that I've seen that actually does it, or proof of work is the only thing that I've seen that does that.
So it's pretty clear, at least within the Bitcoin and the crypto industry, perhaps for others too, that the main roadblock for adoption and let's say, deployment as a monetary system for the world are governments. And it seems to me from everything I read and I watch related to crypto that it's almost a foregone conclusion that it will always be an obstacle. And I wonder what your view is. I wonder if you see almost like a way out for the governments to sort of actually at one point say, well, yeah, actually, we need to adopt Bitcoin like El Salvador did, for example.
So this conversation that we're having right now, that's going to touch lots of people. I know, because I know how many of my other videos and people are talking. It's just one of, and there's a whole bunch of people talking about this. And what I say, that if it's true, and it just deserves a response, right? To be able to, it's either false, true, and everything. And same thing on the existing system. And what you're finding on the existing system is people are realizing it's no longer true, and they're building a bridge to a new system. And the more and more the existing system fights to say to essentially lie, the faster people move to a new system. Because if somebody's telling you they're going to ban Bitcoin in their country, they're screaming at you, you better buy it as fast as you can and get out of our country, because you know what's coming next. We give too much power to this opaque government structure when you realize the government structure is us. It's all of our ideas. Anything, actually, anything, the fabric of what we live in is just an idea. If there's enough people that believe inflation needs to be required for a productive society, then we'll vote for that system and we'll live in that system until they see, wait, that's not true. And they start moving over to another system. And if enough people believe in that new system, that will be true.
And so do you believe governments in Western societies, Canada, the US, or Europe, for instance, are already starting to realize that they are going to have to make a change?
Well, if you just looked at the rise of Pierre Poilievre, right, and what's happening to Trudeau today, and whatever side of the aisle you're on in this debate, his rise is because he actually understands inflation is a hidden tax on the poor, and people are starting to realize that too, and a lot of people are starting to connect with that message. And so, what does Trudeau do in that? What do you say, right? Oh no, it's okay for us to print money, right? It's okay. Let's just keep on printing money and seeing the negative effects of housing prices and going up over the world, and seeing the negative effects of what it does to breaking trust all over the world. And when you say, who do you give power to, who do you vote for, we forget that it's our ideas that give the government power. Right? We forget that. We think of this just great opaque structure, this political, and it's just a structural machine.
So we do still live in a democracy.
You hope so. You hope so that fights it. But again, now let's go to on Pierre on the other side. There is no chance he can say. There's no way that the government could say, okay, we're going to stop printing money. No one, because if you actually did that today, the entire market resets. And when I say resets, the credit that people think that they have in their bank, that is their bank account, they'll go knock on the door of the bank and there's nothing there. The entire system globally fails. Why the stock market is selling off today and it's not even rates haven't gone up. Is tightening hasn't happened yet. It's on the threat of tightening.
Yeah.
Right. And you see massive sell-offs. And why? Because if you allow deflation into a debt bubble that's this big, and that debt bubble is everything we live on top of, the entire debt bubble resets, and all of the banks and everything that we take for granted all over the world resets to zero. The only money you would have is the money under your mattress. I mean, it wouldn't go very far in a world that looked like that. So governments, no matter which government, they have to keep printing. And so that paradox, door one, let the whole system burn down to the ground. Nobody's going to do that.
That's the topic of anti-fragility from, I think, Nassim Taleb.
Yeah, but no government will do that. Door two, it has society essentially kicking over the game board as they fight. Rich get richer, poor get poorer, and you can't build walls high enough to hold out people in a society that looks like that. Not only that, you're concentrating all decisions in a central structure that has to be further and further centralized over time. So those are the only two options out of the existing system. Both don't work. And unfortunately, there is no fix out of the existing system. So you have to build a parallel system. And that parallel system, in my humble opinion, is Bitcoin. And the people that are moving into the parallel system earlier are seeing the hope and everything that I'm talking about as what's happening on top of it and getting really excited. But if you're living in the other system and you're measuring everything from your business and everything else in the other existing, what used to 20 years ago seem, oh, okay, that's just this is, and now you're seeing these cycles happening in your day-to-day. How did this happen in Canada? How did this happen? Where did this war come from? All of these things. The velocity of this, it's a scary place.
Yeah, it's a form of cognitive dissonance as well, I guess, and vested interest and all that. Jeff, this raises so many questions up my head. My head is spinning, to be honest. And I have read your book, and I don't know how many in the room have. We are having a lot of questions come up. I'm sure you're used to that. So I have two more. I'm sorry to go just a tiny bit longer than planned, but I think those are questions that people are asking, even though I can't go through all of them in the chat now. What's the case for Canadian businesses to put Bitcoin on their balance sheet as MicroStrategy did first? But if I'm correct today, there might be 30 or more globally listed companies that have already done so. And because you were at the conference last week, or if you were attending that session, at one point a panelist asked the audience of maybe 200 people, 300 people, how many of you company owners in the room today already have Bitcoin on your balance sheet? Half of the room, granted this was a conference about crypto, but they raised their hands. So there must be thousands and thousands of companies who have done it. So why would you do that?
So in inflation, you can guarantee cash in the bank is losing money every year.
Cash is trash is the expression, right?
But there's a policy that has to have negative real rates to be able to pay back the debt. And that policy has to get worse and worse. So we view, because we've always viewed, and that we don't question this very often, we view that, that's safe. When it's actually the biggest risk you could make. Everything, especially if you have zero allocation to Bitcoin, I would say that you are so offside, like your perception of risk is inverted. Yes, Bitcoin can be volatile. But it's going to be upwardly volatile, and it might be massively
again like tech volatile. In the 90s.
Exactly. But any by the way, any single technology company, and this is bigger because it's a protocol layer, but any single technology company, go look at what Google did as it grew. Go look at what Amazon did as it grew. You'd have drawdowns from in Amazon $120 to $5. And back up to 35 or 3,200. And so technology, as it displaces something on a network effect on a lot of those companies, Google had the same major drawdowns on the way up.
Yeah, you have a fantastic quote in the book that I can't find right now, but I'm gonna poorly paraphrase it. You say something along the lines of money. One of money's core functionalities is a store of value, and so basically you save up maybe to buy something later. So you obviously hope that little bounty that you have will keep its value, but then simultaneously we have inflation, kind of standardized, basically government policy that wants 2% or whatever else it is, inflation, and so essentially we've institutionalized the form of theft of our own hard-earned money.
Yeah, and and if you think about money at that level, we actually don't want more money. That's going to sound oh no, I want more money. But you actually don't. Money is just information. Mm-hmm. What you want is what you believe money will give you.
Yeah.
More safety for the future. You can retire early. I can take a couple more vacations. All of those things, all of us, same. Money is just information. So when you distort money, which is just information, you distort every other economic calculation around the world, and you steal our time, and that's what's happening. And when you have to do it, forget, and again, bad people, good people, and everything else. You have a system design that must do that at an ever increasing rate. And now, when it was 2%, nobody really noticed, and now it has to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and people are noticing.
I have 1.5 questions left. I know I keep saying we're coming to the end, but I think these are questions that are interesting to everyone. What's the future for Bitcoin and crypto? Future of the internet, some say. Future of money, perhaps the most obvious one. A new world order, even?
Yeah, all of the above, but all of the above in due time. So Bitcoin specifically, by solving decentralization and security, and not solving scalability, what it did is kind of the hardest money ever, and would look at a store of value that's better than gold. That's a first kind of 10x type of improvement on what gold gold used to be. That's where you could look at where Bitcoin was. As it emerges on that network, now you can solve scalability into the second layer and third layer, and a whole ecosystem is going to be built on top of it. And it's going to look like the new Googles, the new Amazons are going to be built on top of it, but with a very important differentiation than the existing system. All of those things are going to, meaning all of our work, are going to create a system that drives prices down over time.